The Diamond Bluff, Part 1, A Gift for a Mistress. Nothing is given freely in life. Everything fate offers has its hidden price. Stefan Zweig, Marie Antoinette, 1932. Long before the storm of the French Revolution, a glittering scandal gripped the royal court of Versailles, one that would ripple through history and stain the name of a queen. It was a tale involving a stolen necklace of staggering worth, a gullible cardinal, a charming con artist, and the doomed Queen of France herself, Marie Antoinette. The story begins in 1772. King Louis XV, aging but still smitten with his beautiful mistress Madame du Barry, decided to gift her something extraordinary, a necklace unlike anything seen before. He summoned his royal jewellers, Charles Burmer and Paul Bassange, and gave them a grand task: create a masterpiece worthy of his love. And so, over 2 painstaking years, they assembled a creation of almost mythical splendor, an opulent necklace composed of 629 flawless diamonds, weighing a total of 2,800 carats. It shimmered like a constellation, bold and regal, destined to dazzle the highest circles of Europe. According to an 1890 account by Mrs. Goddard Orpen in the History of Celebrated Diamonds, the necklace was more than jewelry. It was wearable architecture. 17 large diamonds the size of American hazelnuts formed the base row, draping around the neck. From there, 3 festoons of diamonds hung like garlands, with pear-shaped pendants and star-like sparkles dangling gracefully. A longer chain of twin rows swooped from behind the neck, flowing forward and looping in a dazzling knot at the chest, only to separate again and fall downward, shimmering like the northern lights or a glittering zodiac. Even the tassels alone could have been fortunes unto themselves. Another set of diamonds flowed elegantly down the back, like a secret only royalty could wear. But fate intervened. Just as the jewelers completed their masterpiece, Louis XV died of smallpox in 1774. His mistress fell out of favor, and the necklace, this magnificent, wildly expensive creation, was left without a buyer. Worse still, the jewelers had crafted it on credit, hoping the king's favor would bring swift payment. Now, with no king to pay and no noble willing or able to buy such a thing, they faced financial ruin. Years passed, 11 years to be exact. And then came a woman named Jeanne de Valois Saint-Remy, better known by her married name, the Countess de la Motte. Born into poverty, but with an ancient name and an ambition as sharp as a dagger, Jeanne was a natural-born schemer. By weaving clever tales about her supposed royal blood, she managed to marry well and claw her way into elite society. There, she met a man whose fate she would forever alter, Cardinal Louis de Rohan. And thus began one of the greatest cons in European history, where stolen diamonds, forged letters, royal impersonation, and whispered rumors would be spun together into a scandal so explosive that it helped ignite a revolution. By 1781, the jewelers were desperate. The exquisite necklace was still unsold, and its weight hung heavy, not only in diamonds but in debt. They needed a miracle, or a royal buyer. And who better than the new Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, already infamous for her extravagant tastes and love of fashion? They approached her carefully through the court. But France was on the edge of financial collapse, and Marie Antoinette, though tempted, refused. She feared public backlash. She was already being whispered about, too Austrian, too frivolous, too fond of spending. Asking her husband, King Louis XVI, to spend 1.6 million livres on jewelry now. Impossible. Enter Jeanne de la Motte. Charming, manipulative, and cunning, Jeanne saw opportunity in crisis. She claimed to have the Queen's ear, that she was a trusted confidant. In truth, Marie Antoinette had no idea who she was, but that didn't matter. All Jeanne needed was for others to believe it, and one man in particular did: Cardinal Louis de Rohan. The cardinal was eager to win back the Queen's favor. Years earlier, he had offended her with gossip and poor diplomacy while serving in Vienna. Since then, Marie Antoinette had coldly excluded him from royal circles. But Rohan longed for redemption, and Jeanne offered it. She told him the Queen wanted the necklace, but for appearance's sake, she needed the purchase done secretly. The Queen didn't want her name on any documents. Jeanne offered to act as an intermediary, and Rohan, desperate to please, agreed. The trap was set. Jeanne even arranged a nighttime meeting in the gardens of Versailles. There, by candlelight and in shadows, Cardinal de Rohan met a woman dressed like the Queen. She smiled at him, handed him a rose, and whispered forgiveness. Rohan was overjoyed. He believed his royal disgrace was over. In truth, the woman was no queen. She was a young prostitute and modiste named Nicole d'Oliva, chosen by Jeanne for her resemblance to Marie Antoinette. The entire scene was theatre, perfectly staged to deceive. Shortly after, Rohan approached the jewellers. Speaking on behalf of the Queen, he agreed to purchase the necklace. 1.6 million livres, partially in cash, the rest in promissory notes. The jewellers, overjoyed at last, handed over their masterpiece. But when the first payment came due, no money appeared. Worse, when they showed the purchase documents to the court, someone noticed something strange. The Queen's signature looked forged. Suddenly, everything began to unravel. The affair exploded into scandal. The king was informed. The Queen was outraged. On August 15, 1785, ironically the Feast of the Assumption, Cardinal de Rohan was arrested in full ceremonial robes inside the royal palace before a stunned court. Days later, Jeanne de la Motte and several others were also seized. Among them, a mysterious man known across Europe, Count Alessandro Cagliostro, a so-called mystic, alchemist and friend to Cardinal Rohan. The trial would become the scandal of the century, but it was only just beginning. The year was 1785, and the heart of France's monarchy trembled beneath the weight of scandal. The arrest of Cardinal Louis de Rohan sent shockwaves through Paris. A man of the cloth, of noble blood, dragged before the king and queen in disgrace. For many, it was unthinkable. Yet behind this dignified cardinal stood a woman weaving a thread of deceit, Jeanne de la Motte. The necklace was missing, the money had vanished, and the Queen's name had been forged. All eyes turned to the courts. This wasn't just a trial, it was theatre. The public, increasingly resentful of Marie Antoinette and the extravagant monarchy, devoured every detail. Whispers turned into pamphlets. Gossip became political fire. The Parliament of Paris, not a royal court, was assigned to judge the affair, further fueling the idea that this case was about more than theft. It was about trust in the monarchy and the decaying faith of the people in their rulers. The accused were paraded before the judges: Cardinal de Rohan, who still insisted he was acting on the Queen's behalf; Jeanne de la Motte, the puppet master; Nicole d'Oliva, the imposter queen, who played her role under moonlight; Alessandro Cagliostro, mystic and manipulator, or innocent bystander; Jeanne's husband, who had quietly smuggled fragments of the necklace to London, selling the diamonds piece by piece. And what of the Queen? Marie Antoinette, though a victim of fraud, found herself at the center of suspicion. The people believed she had ordered the necklace in secret. Her reputation, already fragile, began to collapse. Jeanne spun her version of events with elegance and venom. She painted herself not as a thief, but as a scapegoat, used and discarded by a manipulative queen. And Cardinal Rohan? He claimed total innocence. He believed every word Jeanne said. He believed the fake queen in the shadows. He believed he was serving his country. When the verdict came on May 31st, 1786, the chamber held its breath. Rohan was acquitted. He was a dupe, not a criminal. Cagliostro was released, expelled from France, but not condemned. Jeanne, however, was not so lucky. She was sentenced to public whipping, branding and life imprisonment in the infamous Salpêtrière prison for women, a grim place often reserved for prostitutes and social outcasts. Her shoulder was seared with a hot iron, marked with the letter V, voleuse, the French word for thief. Her husband, tried in absentia, received the same sentence but had already vanished into the shadows of London. Yet even the branding iron could not end this tale, because Jeanne de la Motte was not a woman to be contained. Paris watched with a mix of horror and fascination as Jeanne de la Motte, now branded, shamed and shackled, was hauled into the cold grey walls of Salpêtrière prison. It was a punishment designed to humiliate as much as to imprison. This was no Bastille with its cold honour. Salpêtrière was for the fallen, for those deemed morally bankrupt by society. But Jeanne was not finished. A master of disguise, manipulation and illusion, she plotted her escape with the same flair she'd used to deceive cardinals and impersonate queens. The story goes that in the dead of night, she disguised herself in men's clothing, slipping past the guards unnoticed. She vanished into the winding alleys of Paris, and by the time the prison officials discovered the escape, Jeanne was gone without a trace. Her destination? London. There, reunited with her husband, she resumed her old ways, but with a new weapon in her arsenal, her pen. Jeanne began to write. In London, she published scandalous memoirs filled with dramatic revelations about the Queen of France. The truth, blurred. The purpose, sharp. Her goal was to destroy the reputation of Marie Antoinette once and for all, and perhaps to reclaim a shred of her own. The public devoured every word. Her accusations, though filled with distortions and hearsay, were believed because they matched the narrative the people already wanted to believe. The Queen, they said, was vain, extravagant, heartless. Jeanne's lies simply added fire to the growing storm, and that storm was coming. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, French agents were tracking her. The necklace had been sold off piece by piece in London, its brilliant diamonds now scattered across Europe. And yet, even as officials closed in, Jeanne slipped away again, like smoke in the wind. But if people could disappear, diamonds could not. And it was those very diamonds, gleaming, stubborn pieces of evidence, that would once again expose Jeanne's true identity. Not in France, not in London, but in Russia. Years passed, the revolution erupted in France, and Marie Antoinette's head fell beneath the guillotine. The monarchy was crushed, the old world undone. But far from Paris, in the frosted splendor of St. Petersburg, a new chapter began. Among the many French émigrés who had fled the chaos and bloodshed, one woman kept to herself. A widow, she claimed. Respectable, quiet. Her name, Madame de Gachet. She lived in a modest home, nestled among other French-speaking exiles. She rarely spoke of the past. She avoided court politics. She was not particularly rich, yet she had the unmistakable air of someone who once knew luxury. And she wore diamonds, not just any diamonds, earrings to be precise, large, shimmering, unusually cut. One evening, at a salon hosted by the noble Princess Voronina, Madame de Gachet was introduced to a visiting gentleman, an aging French officer now working at the Russian imperial court, known for teaching etiquette to the Tsar's pages. As their conversation unfolded, his gaze kept returning to her earrings. Familiar. Too familiar. You see, this man was the son of one of the jewellers who had crafted the infamous necklace for Louis XV all those years ago. He had spent his youth studying the intricate swirls and settings of that legendary piece, and he recognized those diamonds instantly. The woman sipping tea before him, quiet and mysterious, wasn't just some widow. She was Jeanne de la Motte, the most infamous con artist of her age. And those earrings, carefully recut fragments of the Queen's necklace. Word reached the local authorities. Whispered reports were dispatched to the Russian court and then to Paris. Yet by the time officials moved to investigate, the mysterious widow had vanished. Gone again. Or rather, not quite. Jeanne de Gachet didn't disappear entirely. That would have been too neat for her. In the spring of 1824, she was placed, not exactly by choice, in the company of a missionary expedition bound for Crimea. Leading the group were two formidable women, Princess Anna Golitsina and the mystic Baroness Barbara von Krudener. Officially, they were spreading Christian charity. Unofficially, Jeanne was being exiled, politely, discreetly, far from the spotlight and far from St. Petersburg's whispering salons. The mission set off toward the Black Sea, and the woman who once outwitted cardinals and impersonated queens began the final, fading chapter of her life. The caravan of faith arrived at its distant destination, a tiny Crimean village nestled between the hills and the sea. Among the missionaries spreading prayers and scripture, there was one woman who kept her past tightly wrapped in silence. Jeanne de Gachet, once known to the courts of Europe as Jeanne de la Motte. Here, in the village of Coctebel, time moved differently. Jeanne, now well into old age, lived in a small cottage by the shore, with only a quiet servant girl and a grumbling housekeeper for company. She rarely left the house, except to walk to the rocky shore and stare for hours at the endless blue of the Black Sea, as though waiting for something or someone from long ago. To the villagers, she was nothing but an old Frenchwoman with odd manners and a sharp tongue. But to the few noble visitors passing through, her sharp eyes, elegant French, and rare knowledge of Versailles' inner circle raised questions. One such visitor, Maria Alexandrovna Baudet, remembered her clearly even years later. She was not warm but striking, not cruel but commanding. Her voice carried stories of kings and mystics. She spoke of the court of Louis XVI as if she had danced through it herself. She teased, hinted, and never confirmed anything, as if the past was a game she alone remembered the rules to. And perhaps it was. Jeanne never denied her identity, but she never fully claimed it either. She thrived in that shadow between truth and illusion. And while others lived openly, she lived guarded, but never poor. Because wherever she went, there were always rumors of hidden diamonds. The villagers, simple and suspicious, whispered about what she kept locked away. They wondered why, for someone of modest means, she owned fine lace, rare fabrics, and those peculiar rings with old European settings. They wondered why, after her death in 1830, her house was immediately searched by local police. Every drawer turned inside out, every hatbox, every lining of every dress. Even the coffin was examined, carefully, nervously. They were searching for something. Some expected to find the missing fragments of the Queen's necklace, but nothing was found. Except for one strange detail. The young servant girl disappeared that very night. She left quietly, taking nothing, and was never seen again. No name, no trace. Not even her family ever heard from her again. The investigators reported back to St. Petersburg. No diamonds recovered, no evidence found, and one minor mystery, irrelevant. But the villagers of Coctebel remembered. To this day, in a forgotten corner of the old cemetery, there lies a moss-covered grave, its stone nearly eroded by time. No grand marker, no family name. But those who know the legend say this is where Jeanne de la Motte, the great diamond thief, the Queen's shadow, sleeps beneath the earth. And somewhere, perhaps still, a few stones from the most famous necklace in history glint in secret places, carried through time by those clever enough to remain invisible. The curtain had long since fallen on the life of Jeanne de la Motte. The revolution was history. Marie Antoinette was a memory carved into marble and tragedy, but the necklace, that necklace, still shimmered at the edge of legend. And then, in the year 1871, almost a century after the affair, something incredible happened. France was once again in turmoil. The Paris Commune, a radical socialist uprising, had seized the city. In response, the French army launched a brutal assault. Amid the chaos, flames swept through the capital, reducing entire sections to ash. And among the burning buildings stood one of Paris's proudest royal palaces, the Tuileries. Built by Catherine de' Medici, home to kings and emperors, it had once been the reluctant residence of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette after they were forced to leave Versailles in 1789. But now, in 1871, it burned. As the palace smouldered and collapsed, workers were sent in to clear the ruins. Days turned into weeks, stone was lifted, ash swept away. And then, as the story goes, one labourer uncovered something hidden deep beneath the rubble. A locked iron chest adorned with the 3 fleurs-de-lis of the Bourbon dynasty. The chest was immediately taken to the Ministry of the Interior. Rumours swirled, officials gathered, and at last the chest was opened. Inside, they found gold, documents, jewels, and something else. An exquisite diamond necklace, unlike anything anyone had seen for decades. Some of the older officials gasped. Could it be? Could this truly be the necklace? The same one that had vanished in scandal, travelled through London, reappeared in Russia, and dissolved into rumour. The craftsmanship matched the old descriptions. The design echoed the lost masterpiece created by Boehmer and Bassange in 1774. The necklace was intact, not disassembled, not scattered, as if hidden away and forgotten, or protected. And then came the twist. The treasure was not returned to the French state. Instead, it was handed over, quietly and without explanation, to representatives of the Bourbon family, France's deposed royal dynasty. Even in exile, the Bourbons still carried their titles, and apparently someone believed this necklace belonged to them. No public display, no museum, no official statement. And once again, the diamonds vanished from history. Was it truly the Queen's necklace? Or a clever replica? Was the original never broken apart, but hidden all along, perhaps even by the Queen herself during the early days of the Revolution? Or did someone, perhaps Jeanne herself, recover it, only to stash it away, leaving behind just fragments to be sold and seen? No one can say for sure, but the timing, the mystery, the unmistakable design, it all suggests that some stories don't die. They simply wait, buried under ash and stone, until someone pulls them back into the light. The Queen's necklace affair had begun with a whisper and ended with a roar. It had left behind scandal, broken lives, and a tangled web of deceit that spanned not just the salons of Versailles, but far beyond. For many, the affair was more than just a crime. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the monarchy, the nobility, and the decadent, self-destructive world of pre-revolutionary France. And at the centre of it all stood Marie Antoinette. She had never asked for the necklace, and yet somehow it became forever entwined with her image. But the true victim of the scandal was not just the Queen's reputation. It was Louis de Rohan, the proud cardinal, once the epitome of royal favour, now a man who would be forever associated with one of the greatest frauds of the age. Louis de Rohan was not just any churchman. He had been Archbishop of Strasbourg, a man of immense political importance. He had been one of the wealthiest and most influential figures at the royal court, but he was also a man with a weakness, his desire for power. Like many of his peers, he saw in the Queen's favour the keys to his political future. He wanted to be close to the royal family, to wield influence, to rise above the clerical ranks and achieve glory. His ambition blinded him. When the fraud was finally revealed, Rohan's fall was swift and brutal. He had been duped, made a fool of by a woman whose charms and manipulations went far beyond what any man, let alone a cardinal, could have anticipated. Jeanne de la Motte, the woman behind the entire plot, had played him like a pawn in a game far bigger than he could comprehend. She had played on his ego, his desire to prove himself worthy of the Queen's affections, and most crucially, his willingness to believe the best of the woman he loved, even if that woman was a complete stranger to Marie Antoinette. In court, Rohan claimed ignorance. He truly believed that the Queen wanted him to act on her behalf in the matter of the necklace. The defense was simple. He was a victim of deception, manipulated by Jeanne into believing that his actions were sanctioned by the Queen. But the court of public opinion had already made up its mind. Rohan was forever tainted. His cardinalship was revoked, his name was dragged through the mud, and in the aftermath of the trial, his career was in ruins. He would spend the remainder of his life in exile, his once pristine reputation reduced to a mere footnote in the grand tale of royal corruption and intrigue. But what about the true mastermind, Jeanne de la Motte? For her, the outcome was far more brutal. She was caught, tried, and sentenced to an unforgettable fate, a public flogging, the infamous brand of V, marking her as a thief for all to see. Then came the prison sentence in the notorious Salpêtrière, a notorious women's prison, where she would spend the rest of her days as a pariah, the living embodiment of deceit. Her story, however, didn't end there. In the prison, she escaped. Using her skills as a trickster and manipulator, Jeanne managed to elude the law, vanishing from Paris in 1790. Her trail cold, her future unknown. She had disappeared into history, leaving behind only rumours, whispers, and the faint scent of intrigue. Some say she fled to London, where she wrote memoirs that painted a picture of Marie Antoinette as a vain and extravagant queen who was just as corrupt as the rest of the monarchy. These memoirs, filled with half-truths and fabrications, became fuel for the revolutionary fervour that was brewing across France. But in the midst of the revolutionary chaos, Jeanne's legacy became entangled with something far more dangerous, the growing hatred of the monarchy. Her actions, though condemned by some, were viewed by many as a reflection of everything that was wrong with the old regime. For the revolutionaries, Jeanne's tale was proof that the monarchy was rotten to the core. The extravagant life of Marie Antoinette was no longer just the subject of gossip. It had become the emblem of an old world that needed to fall. An old world that would soon be swept away by the violent tide of the revolution. The revolution had begun in earnest by the time Jeanne de la Motte vanished into obscurity, but her legacy, the scandal of the diamond necklace, had left a deep and lasting mark on both the monarchy and the emerging revolutionary spirit. The fallout from the affair became one of the key catalysts in the unravelling of Louis XVI's reign, and, by extension, the entire French monarchy. The scandal was a powerful symbol of a corrupt, decadent court that seemed out of touch with the suffering of the people. It fed the flames of revolutionary sentiment in France and became part of the narrative used by radicals to fuel the growing anger against the royal family. Despite the failed plot, the consequences were severe. Marie Antoinette, though never directly involved in the scam, was publicly associated with the whole affair. The Queen's reputation, already strained due to her extravagant lifestyle and foreign origins, was now irrevocably tarnished. The scandal gave ammunition to those who saw her as the epitome of royal corruption, an out-of-touch queen, out of step with the nation's needs. In the days following the scandal's unveiling, Paris grew restless. The court's legitimacy was increasingly questioned. Every whisper, every rumour about the Queen's involvement in the plot seemed to confirm the widespread belief that the monarchy was irredeemable, beyond saving. But the impact wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. For Louis XVI, the scandal was a reminder of the royal family's isolation from the people they governed. It would be one of many blows to a monarchy already facing mounting challenges, both internal and external. But it was the humiliation of Marie Antoinette, the woman at the heart of the scandal, that would haunt the court. In 1791, with the revolution looming on the horizon, the monarchy would face its greatest test yet. The flight to Varennes, the failed attempt by Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette to escape revolutionary Paris, was another turning point. Their flight symbolized a betrayal of the nation, and though they were caught and brought back, it shattered any remaining faith the people had in their monarchs. The scandal of the necklace, still fresh in people's minds, became a part of the growing tide of public anger. It was not just the Queen's extravagant spending that riled the public, it was the notion that she and the monarchy were complicit in a grand deception, both political and financial. As the royal family faced the pressures of revolution, Jeanne de la Motte's name echoed in the streets of Paris. The affair she had created, though ultimately a simple act of personal greed, had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with the old regime. Her actions, once seen as a clever con, had become the focal point of a nation's wrath. While Jeanne herself had disappeared, leaving behind only traces of her lies and manipulation, her shadow lingered in the revolutionary courtrooms, where she was referenced in the speeches of radicals who spoke of the Queen's treachery. Maximilien Robespierre, the fiery leader of the Jacobins, even used the scandal to bolster the case for the Queen's eventual trial and execution, presenting her as an agent of royal corruption and an enemy of the people. In the years that followed, Marie Antoinette's fate was sealed. The Reign of Terror swept through France, bringing with it the guillotine and the final tragic end to the monarchy. The Queen, though never formally tried for the diamond necklace affair, would ultimately be condemned for her perceived role in the nation's suffering. But as the revolution gained strength, it was the wealthy, decadent nobility, so often represented by Marie Antoinette, that became the target of the revolutionaries' rage. The scandal of the diamond necklace was, in hindsight, a fitting microcosm of the deeper forces at play: inequality, corruption, and the erosion of trust between the monarchy and the people. The Queen's End, a dramatic conclusion. In 1793, Marie Antoinette faced her final trial. Though her role in the necklace affair was largely forgotten in the face of the revolution's relentless march, it was clear that her once untouchable status had evaporated entirely. The public's anger, long stoked by the scandal, now reached its climax. In a swift and brutal trial, she was convicted and sentenced to death. On October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette, once the Queen of France, ascended the scaffold with a stoic grace, her head held high as the blade fell. Her death was the end of an era. The diamond necklace, though not directly responsible for her execution, remained a part of her legacy, a symbol of her perceived failure to understand the discontent of the French people. It had become a piece of revolutionary law, illustrating the moral bankruptcy of the French aristocracy. The downfall of the French monarchy was a slow unraveling, but by the time Marie Antoinette's head fell at the Place de la Révolution, the revolution had passed a point of no return. The image of the Queen, a woman once hailed as the epitome of royal beauty and grace, now immortalized as a martyr of the monarchy, stood in stark contrast to the viciousness with which she had been condemned. Her tragic fate was now intertwined with the very spirit of revolution that would soon change the course of history. But what happened next was nothing short of a bloody transformation. The Reign of Terror consumed those closest to the monarchy, including the Duke of Orleans, and swept through France like a relentless storm. Maximilien Robespierre, with his razor-sharp vision of a new society, used the revolution's momentum to impose a level of control and discipline that left little room for dissent. France had already been dissolving the old structures. The Estates General had given way to the National Assembly, which had declared France a republic, marking the formal end of centuries of monarchy. But even more drastic changes followed. The execution of King Louis XVI in January 1793 was an irreversible step into a world that would be completely reordered. A revolutionary reign of blood. In the aftermath of the monarchy's fall, the revolutionaries began to dismantle everything that had once propped up the royal order. The feudal system was abolished, and churches and noble estates were seized. The Ancien Régime, the centuries-old structure of power, privilege and wealth, was crumbling. The common people, the peasants and the urban poor who had long suffered under the weight of aristocratic excesses, finally had their day, even if it was at the cost of their own lives. The French Revolution was, to some, a promised land of equality, fraternity and liberty, but to others it was a nightmare. The mass guillotining that occurred during the Reign of Terror would leave deep scars across the nation, and Robespierre's reign of fear made it impossible for anyone to feel truly safe. The political elites, who had once enjoyed lives of luxury, were now forced into the same blood-stained reality as those they had long oppressed. Even Jeanne de la Motte, whose role in the diamond necklace affair had long been diminished, was a symbol of that new world. She had once been the face of betrayal and deception, but in the wake of the revolution, her story was one of irrelevant tragedy. With Marie Antoinette and the monarchy now gone, Jeanne had become, in a sense, a relic of a different time, her ambitions overshadowed by the new order that arose, the fall of Robespierre and the rise of new powers. The Reign of Terror would not last forever. Robespierre, who had once seemed like the inevitable leader of France's revolutionary future, soon became a victim of his own overreach. In 1794, his ruthless pursuit of revolutionary ideals led to his downfall. The Thermidorian reaction was a period of counter-revolution that eventually saw Robespierre arrested and executed, his own guillotine as the final testament to his reign. The chaos left in Robespierre's wake created an opening for other political factions. In the post-terror era, power shifted rapidly in the hands of those seeking to stabilize France, including Napoleon Bonaparte, who would rise from the wreckage to take control of the country. The Republic itself was officially declared, but its grip on power was shaky, and France was still reeling from the dramatic shifts in power. Despite the initial victories, the revolution continued to be marked by instability. The Revolutionary Legacy, a nation reborn. As the revolution began to stabilize under the leadership of Napoleon, the repercussions of the diamond necklace affair seemed far removed. Jeanne de la Motte's scandal, once a flashpoint of political and royal drama, was soon overshadowed by the larger forces that had reshaped the nation. However, the echoes of the revolution's central message, the destruction of privilege, the questioning of authority, and the creation of a new republic remained. The revolution was not just about a single event or figure, it was a symbol of the end of absolute monarchy and the birth of the modern nation-state. It signaled the world's first serious attempt to create a society based on equality and democracy, though the ideal would not be fully realized for generations. For the people of France, the revolution would be a mixed blessing. While the aristocracy and clergy were no longer the dominant powers, the poor and working-class citizens who had dreamed of a better future for themselves were left with the hard truth. Change had come, but it had been messy, violent, and chaotic. They had overthrown the monarchy, but they had not yet found true justice or peace. The end of an era and the dawn of a new world. In the final analysis, the diamond necklace affair was a symbol of the profound changes that were taking place in France and beyond. It illustrated the corruption and decay of the old order and provided a potent rallying cry for the forces that sought to destroy it. But as the revolution moved forward, it became clear that it wasn't just the necks of queens and kings that would fall, it would be entire societies that would be upended, and old systems of power that would be replaced by something untested and new. The death of the monarchy marked the end of an era in France, and the beginning of a new chapter in both French and world history. Jeanne de la Motte, Marie Antoinette, and Louis XV were footnotes in the grand narrative of the revolution, but their story would remain as a reminder of the fragility of power and the unpredictable ways in which history can be shaped by scandal, ambition, and the desire for change. And so, the diamond necklace, the object that had sparked the scandal, that had been the centerpiece of intrigue, deception, and conspiracy was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It became a symbol of a revolution that had forever altered the course of history. In its sparkling stones, the story of an old world's demise and a new world's uncertain rise was captured, forever etched into the fabric of France's revolutionary past.